God wants to speak to us this morning, and we are still on the exposition of the light of God. God is interested in making us to know more and more about His light. So our standing text is still in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, where God commanded light. That was the first time the Bible made us to understand that God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Let there be light, and there was light. And that is why the light of God is important. We already understood what darkness represented, what darkness stands for. And I'm sure no man, no woman, no child, no adult, no family, no community we wish to be in darkness or live in darkness or even have darkness experience. No one. So that is why this morning we want to look at the direct opposites of darkness. And that direct opposite of darkness is light. We are not just talking about light. We are talking about the light of God. What does the light of God represent in the life of a person, in the life of a family, in the life of a community? The light of God is a symbol, or the symbol and expression of God's divine presence, guidance, purity, righteousness, salvation, and truth that chases or removes all forms of darkness, evils, and wickedness in a man's life, in a family, in a community, in a state, and even at the world at large. So God's light has the capacity to remove whatsoever that is darkness, or whatsoever that represents darkness in an individual's life. It could be a family, it could be a whole community, it could be an entire state, and it could be the world. And that is why God's light is enough for every one of us. Meaning, every one of us needs God's light. We need to dwell, or we need to live, we need to continually to dwell in God's light. Because where there is God, there is light. Where there is light, there is God. And there is what? There is God's presence, there is God's guidance, there is God's purification, there is God's righteousness, there is God's salvation, which is Savior, the power to save, there is God's truth, and that remove every iota of darkness in our lives. So it is important that we all come to God's light. It is important that we all turn against darkness. What are some of the elements that represent the characteristics of God's light in a man's life? When you see a man or a woman or a state or community or family that are carriers of God's light, you find out that there's a division, a demarcation between that person and darkness. So God's light causes division. And that is why in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, if you read downward in verse 4, you find out that immediately when light comes, when God commanded light to come, then there was no any form of darkness again. So there was a total separation. And John chapter 1 verse 5, it said when the light come, darkness could not withstand. So darkness and light cannot coexist at the same time. At the same time, darkness and light cannot be oxymoronic in a man's life, in a family. So one must be there. And that is why we need to chase darkness away from our life. We need to chase away darkness from our family. And what do we need to do? By coming to the light of God. So the only thing that can separate us from sickness, from evil, from wickedness, from sin, is the light of God. God's light proclaims that we are God's people. So when you see a person that carries God's light, you will identify God in that person's life, in that family. That this family of a truth, there is God's light in their home. This person of a truth, there is God's light in his life. This nation of a truth, there is God's light in that nation. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9 says, 1 Peter 2 9 says, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, an holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. That is God's light. So God hath called us out of darkness. So when you practicalize, when you dispense the light of God, then you are a priesthood of God's kingdom. So we are God's people by being carrier of God's light. So wherever we go to, wherever we find ourselves, we need to show forth the light of God. God's light takes us or takes a man away from the power and influence of Satan. Do you wish to be free from satanic manipulation? Do you desire to be free from wickedness? Do you desire to be free from all form of evil or satanic control? Then God's light is for you. There is need for you to come to God's light. There is need for you to invite God's light, inviting God, inviting Jesus into your life. That is the only way for you to be free from every form of satanic manipulation. You need God's light. The light of God should be the first thing that we should all desire.